So this is going to be part 2 of the seed of Abraham. So in part 1 of the seed of Abraham, I explained Abraham, the cave beast who dwelt in caves. Keep in mind that Abraham and the Israelites are the only people mentioned in the Bible who dwelt in caves. So I've already explained Abraham, and now I want to explain the 12 tribes. So I originally wanted to be able to do this in all one video, but I'm going to break down the 12 tribes in one video at a time. So I'm going to start with the tribe of Dan. So first I want to look at what the Black Hebrew Israelite teachers on YouTube say about the tribe of Dan. And if we look at these 12 tribe charts that have been put out, this one was put out by the IUIC, and it says that the tribe of Dan represents Cuba, or the Cuban people. And this is the chart that was put out by the GOCC that says Manasseh represents Cuba, and they don't even mention the tribe of Dan. So I just wanted to share with you those two charts and to point out the conflict of who the 12 tribes are and the confusion amongst the Black community as to who these 12 tribes are and who these people truly are in the Bible. So let's see what the Bible says about the tribe of Dan. So one of the first things that I want to point out to you about Dan is that Dan is first mentioned in the Bible not as a tribe, but as a land. So if we read in Genesis 14:14, it says that Abraham heard that his brother was taken captive, so he armed his trained servants born in his own house, 318, and he pursued them unto Dan. So again, Dan is a place, not a tribe. So the first time we see the mention of Dan, it is a place and not a tribe. And I want to point out one mistake that is clearly made here in the Bible. If you see here in Genesis 14:12, it says, and they took Lot, which we know is Abraham's nephew. And then just 2 verses down, it says that it was Abraham's brother, not his nephew. So I just wanted to point that mistake out. But the important thing is that Dan is a place and not a tribe. So if we look at this stela, which is called the smiting scene of ancient Egypt, and this goes back 5,000 years, or actually 3100 BC. So this is the king of Den, which is actually the biblical Dan, smiting the invading Asiatics. So Den, or Dan, is a location of the first battle recorded by the Egyptians in 3100 BC. And the ancient city of Dan, or Den, is on the River Jordan in Israel, and it is also known as Tel Dan. So in 1993, they found what is called the Tel Dan inscription, and this was found at Tel Dan. And it was originally a victory monument celebrating the conquest of the city of Dan by a foreign king in the 9th century BC. So years later, it had been smashed up, and the pieces were used to build a wall alongside the main southern gate of the city. And the language of the inscription is Aramaic. So the important thing about this is that they state that this inscription belongs to, or may belong to, King Hazael of Damascus. Now, the important thing about this is that this particular battle, or this event, can be found in 2 Kings 8:16, 8:21, 8:23, 8:24, and also in Chronicles and 2 Samuel's. And you can read all about this event in the Bible. So the Tel Dan inscription was written in Aramaic by a foreign invader, and this foreign king claims to have defeated and killed Joram, which is the son of Ahab, the king of Israel, as well as Ahaziah, which is the son of Jehoram, king of the house of David. So here it states that the campaign referred to in the Tel Dan inscription is probably narrated in a different guise in 2 Kings chapter 9, where Jehu is the usurper of the throne of Israel and claims to have killed both King Joram and his heirs, as well as Ahaziah of Judah. So we can see the discrepancies in the biblical text as well as these ancient inscriptions that were found in Tel Dan. They tell us a much different story. So the references for the Tel Dan inscription that I'm sharing with you here is taken from a book that I have called The Discovery, and this can be found on page 239. So far, Dan is not a tribe, but Dan is a location. Dan is the location that Abraham first invaded. According to the Bible, Abraham is the first person to invade the land of Dan. And the Tel Dan inscription shows us that the people who invaded the land of Den or Dan, which was Egyptian territory, these people were an Aramaic speaking people. So the same Aramaic speaking people also invaded another territory within Israel because Dan is within Israel. So these Aramaic speaking people also invaded another location in Israel, which is Lachish. So Lachish was invaded in 722 BC by the same Aramaic speaking people who invaded Dan. So we can see this tablet which shows us the Aramaic language, and this was recorded in 722 BC by the Aramaic speaking people when they invaded the land of Lachish, and they did so with the help of the Cushites. So just as it says Abraham is told to go down into the land of Israel or Canaan, and this will be his inheritance, and it's given to him by his God. Well, Abraham went down into the land of Israel and invaded this territory because he went with the Cushites, not ordained by God, but it was the Cushites who brought him to the land and helped him overtake the Egyptian cities. And in turn, they were promised to be set up in the territory of Israel as such titles such as governors and mayors, sub-rulers of the states, that they were set up by the Cushites in the land of Israel. So these tablets, you can see, this is showing the expulsion of the people from the land of Israel. These people were Egyptians. When you see that they're showing the filleting them alive, and this is from Lachish as well, we have the Assyrians who go in and they're filleting alive the inhabitants of Lachish. These people are Egyptians as well. You have to remember that Lachish and all of Israel was Egyptian territory. So I want to point out the discrepancies between the cuneiform and Aramaic tablets and the modern version of the Bible. In 2 Kings 9, it says that the house of Ahab rules Israel, and Jehu is made king of Israel because the prophet Elisha said so. So Jehu is told to kill his master Ahab and his whole house. And in 2 Kings, it says that Jehu, the usurper of the throne of Israel, claims to have killed King Joram and all of his heirs, as well as Ahaziah, who was visiting the king of Israel. But the Tel Dan inscription says that Jehu assassinated the two kings of Israel, and there's no message from a prophet of Elisha from the Lord, and there's no record of Jehu's actions being ordained by God, just that Jehu assassinated the rightful heirs of the throne and then took the kingdom of Israel. And we know that the land of Israel belonged to the Egyptians. And all of the references for the invasion of the land of Lachish can be found in a book that I have called The Great Empires of the Ancient World. So moving forward, I want to show you more on who the Aramaic speaking people were. So during this time, these Aramaic speaking people are now living in the land of Canaan. And here we have, this is taken from the wall temple of the tomb of the chapel of Sobek Hotep from the 18th dynasty. And this is showing tribute bearers who are Canaanites, and they come from the land of Palestine, the land of Turkey, and the land of Lebanon. And it says that they came to present metalwork from Syria to the Egyptian king. And it says one man in the upper register has brought his son, depicted naked and wearing a sidelock of youth in the Egyptian manner. And he brought him his son to the king for safekeeping and education in the Egyptian court. And I want to read this whole page because I think it's important because it gives us insight as to how the Canaanites assimilated themselves into the Egyptian culture. So it says that the Canaanites appear in Egypt mostly from the later years of Thutmose III as prisoners of war from campaigns of conquest. But when their numbers proved insufficient, Pharaoh had resource to forced deportation. So Amenhotep II transported more than 86,000 men from Palestine and southern Syria. To discourage insurrection, Pharaoh required that the Canaanite mayors send their children to the royal court on the Nile, where they would be kept against the good behavior of their parents. So the Egyptians took the children of their prisoners and they held them. And it says, while there, they were brought up as Egyptian pages, grooms, and guardsmen. And after their fathers died, so they were kept indefinitely until their fathers died. And when their fathers died, they were sent back to the cities that they came from to succeed as mayor. The rank and file of the deported Canaanites were put to work on menial tasks, but skill and intelligence could bring rewards. Most served as farmhands on royal temple or private estates, or as weavers in the workhouse. The Apiru, which is what the Egyptians called them, and the Cushites called them the Habiru, the Apiru, a social class of mafia-like brigades, were used on construction sites and quarries, cutting and hauling stone. The better educated could hope for higher status: construction engineers, middle ranking bureaucrats, and doctors, scribes, and soldiers. By the 12th century BCE, the upper ranks of the royal catering service, the very butlers who waited on Pharaoh, were frequently filled by Canaanites. Sometimes foreign princes would be brought to Egypt for diplomatic marriages, firing the popular imagination and giving birth to folklore. Pharaoh wins the fair princess. The Egyptians' disdain for foreigners meant that Asiatic immigrants in general remained culturally discreet. However, some intermarriage did occur, and there can be little doubt that the greater contact with outsiders was a direct result of imperial power served to undermine traditional attitudes towards the vile Asiatics. So here we have a Canaanite who comes from the land of Syria, giving his child to the Egyptian royal court. And the child would be raised until his father's death. So these children essentially were raised by Egyptians. So, people wonder, Black people wonder today, well, how is it that people like the Jewish people and the white races, how is it that they've gained so much knowledge of the ancient Black races in Egypt and Kush? And this is because the Egyptians and the Kushites taught them. They taught them everything. And instead of utterly exterminating them, they taught them and they reassimilated them back into the lands that they invaded. So this is taken from the Palace of Ramses, and it shows us going from left to right. This is a Libyan, all the way to the left, in the middle, a Canaanite, and to the far right, the Sea People, or the people known as the Philistines. And this here is another relief showing the Asiatics coming into Upper Egypt. And again, you can see these are the same Asiatics or the invaders or the same Aramaic speaking people who at this particular time are now inhabiting Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, Libya, and Turkey. And this is the battle axe from the first king of the 18th dynasty, King Ahmose. And this is his battle axe, and is showing that he is smiting the Asiatics. This relief is taken from Ramses, where he is shown smiting the Philistines, or the people known as the Sea People. So, one thing that I want to point out about the tribe of Dan and all of the 12 tribes in general is that they named themselves after the land that they invaded. And Abraham invaded the land that the Egyptians called Den. Then later, the people inhabiting, these invaders inhabiting the land of Den, called themselves the tribe of Dan. So when the Asiatics invaded the land that the Egyptians called Hatti, the invaders later called themselves Hittites after the name of the land. So they still do this today. And an example of this is they invaded America. So the people, the white races who invaded America, even though they came from different parts of Europe and were known as Germans and, British and this and that, when they invaded, we see that later they're just called Americans. These invading white people who live in America today, they're no longer called by the names that they were called before. So this is a practice that white people began to do all the way back to, in ancient times in Northeast Africa when they were invading all of this territory that we call the Middle East today. Because prior to this, we know that they came out of caves. So let's examine what happens to the tribe of Dan, because in Numbers 2:31 it says that the total number of the tribe of Dan at this point is 158,000, and they are noted in the Bible as being one of the largest of the tribes. So what happens to this tribe that we get to the end of the Bible and the tribe of Dan is no longer mentioned? So to understand this, you have to understand that according to the Bible, Jacob marries Rachel, but Rachel can't have any children. So Rachel gives Jacob her handmaid. So her handmaid, who is named Bala, gives birth to Jacob's children, which are Naphtali and Dan. So the tribe of Dan and Naphtali genetically are the same, carrying the same male DNA of their father Jacob and the female DNA of their mother Bilhah. So this could explain the disappearance, you could say, of the tribe of Dan, which could have been assimilated into the tribe of Naphtali. Another thing I want to mention is that Reuben, Jacob's son, also has sex with Bilhah as well. So Jacob and his son Reuben both had sex with the same woman, the mother of Dan. So in Genesis 49:16 through 17, it says that Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path that biteth the horse's heels, so that the rider shall fall backwards. And do you know what an adder is? An adder is a snake, but it's a specific snake. It's a Eurasian snake. So I want to show you a few more things in the Bible that tell us who the tribe of Dan is and explain why the tribe of Dan will no longer exist by the time you get to the end of the Bible. So in Exodus 38:23, Ahisamach, who is of the tribe of Dan, it says that he is an engraver and a cunning workman and an embroiderer in blue and purple and scarlet and fine linen. So the tribe of Dan produced the blue, purple, and scarlet and fine linen in the Bible. And in Revelations chapter 18 tells us of the people in the city that wear the blue and purple and scarlet and fine linen. And in Revelations 18:10, it's the city of Babylon. So Revelations 18:16 through 17 says, at last, the great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, for in 1 hour such great riches has come to naught. And in Revelations 18:19, in 1 hour she is made desolate. Revelations 18:21, a stone and it says, a great millstone is cast into the sea, thus with violence shall that great city of Babylon be thrown down and shall be found no more. So in Revelations 18:24, it says, and in her was found the blood of the prophets and of the saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. Notice how this city is called a woman, or it's referred to as she. And the woman is also mentioned in Revelation 17:4, and it reads, the woman arrayed in purple and scarlet color and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. In Revelation 17:1-2, she is the great whore that sits on many waters, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her and have been made drunk. In Revelation 17:5, and upon her head was written, Mystery Babylon, the great mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. So the tribe of Dan, the producer of the blue, purple, scarlet, and fine linen, we see later that the Bible says that the tribe of Dan, the ones who wear the blue, purple, and scarlet and fine linen, live in Babylon, which is Rome. Rome is Babylon. Rome is filled with the bones of the prophets. The inhabitants of the Vatican wear the blue, purple, and scarlet and fine linen. Mystery Babylon is the great mother of harlots. Rome, or the Vatican, is the mother church of Christianity. It's Christianity that has fornicated the earth, and the inhabitants of the earth are drunk from the Abrahamic religions today. Christianity started in Rome, and it spread over the earth in every location that white people invaded. And even the Bible says that the mother church of Christianity will be destroyed by a great stone cast into the sea. So the mother church will be destroyed because she has caused the inhabitants of the earth to commit fornication against the true God. Fornicating against the true God with these Abrahamic religions that control the minds of men today. So in the end of the Bible, in the book of Revelations, chapter 7, the tribe of Dan is no more. And the tribe of Dan was one of the largest tribes. But when Revelation says that 144,000, 12,000 from each tribe will be saved, Dan is not one of them because Dan has been destroyed. So this explains why Dan is not mentioned as one of the 144,000 that will be spared. So this concludes the tribe of Dan, who is referred to in the Bible as an Adar, a Eurasian snake, and Dan is the white Romans who wear the purple and scarlet and fine linen, and they are the mother of harlots, the mother church, and the ones who have caused the people of the earth to sin against God. And for that, this city will be destroyed, and the tribe of Dan with it.